welcome to another episode of America on Trial, where we discuss current issues in law, politics, and public policy. And tonight we have an outstanding panel that includes Jeff Teichert, Assistant Attorney General, Utah, Fernando Leal, attorney in New York City, and Guidry Stensunate, an immigration attorney in Miami, Florida. Now let's get to one of the major issues of the day, Elon Musk and Twitter. Now, we know that Twitter, for the last several years, has been censoring information on their platform that doesn't comport with their liberal views. So Elon Musk took over Twitter and is simply seeking to make Twitter a public forum where all diverse perspectives are welcome. What's the problem with that? Why is everyone in such an uproar? Fernando?
I don't have an issue with it because now Twitter seems to be fun because it's the wild, wild west. People are posting whatever they want. There are a whole bunch of fake accounts that are popping up, posting a whole bunch of complete and utter nonsense. And some people can't discern from the nonsense, which I personally don't understand. But honestly, it's the way social media should be. Either they're going to be the newsstand and let all the news come out, or lack thereof, or they're going to be the press themselves and they're going to moderate content and they're going to, restrict the content that they want on.
Well, that's
they can't have it both ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Guidry, here's what I'd like to ask you. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, public parks and Main Street were where people went to disseminate their political views. Now what happens on social media? So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, they really have become the new public forum. And the First Amendment, if anything, requires that we tolerate views that we deem offensive, distasteful, or unpopular. So isn't Elon Musk taking over Twitter a good thing for the First Amendment, for free speech, and for the people?
Well, Adam, maybe it would be a good thing if Elon Musk would not be a tyrant of certain information. He's very vocal about what he likes, what he dislikes, what ticks him, and he actually operates Twitter, one of the largest communication platforms, in that way. So no, Adam, I think that Elon Musk...
Wait a second, I have to challenge you on this just one bit.
Please do, I'm waiting.
This few years has thrown around this term disinformation or misinformation, and really what that's been has been a code word for we're going to censor views we don't like, such as from Donald Trump. For example, the idea that COVID came from a lab, that was censored as disinformation. But what do we know now? That COVID, in fact, likely came from the lab. Musk is simply saying, let's welcome diverse viewpoints. So are you saying that you're not in favor of allowing diverse viewpoints?
I would not say that Elon Musk is saying that welcome diverse viewpoints. I would ask you to look into not such a long-term history. Look at the January 6th riot that caused extreme consequences, and there were people who were dead, and it was completely unprecedented what happened in the United States, the democratic hegemonic country. People are not ready, I think, or maybe incapable to be able to face all the information that could be catered and triggered to specific reader and given to that person in order to manipulate this person's opinions and ideas. Elon Musk is genius. I feel even bad talking about his decisions because who I am, But I think that there's very important thing when it comes to hate speech. I think that there are real consequences of some content that is not completely moderated. So I'm not saying that it has to be free for all.
That's a fair point. Certainly, go ahead. Please finish.
No, but I think that it might be maybe even having something similar as Facebook had, like a council of certain members who would read certain information or certain posts and decide whether they could fall within the First Amendment, whether they would trigger 230 section or so on. So I think that there needs to be something. I yet don't know what, and it doesn't have to be. In my opinion, Twitter should not be open for all.
I'm going to offer a solution, and I noticed you mentioned the January 6th riots, but you didn't mention the riots after George Floyd's death. But moving on.
There are so many riots to mention.
Jeff, my solution is this. Social media should be governed by the same standards that the U.S. Supreme Court's jurisprudence has established under the First Amendment, meaning this. All unpopular, distasteful and even offensive speech is permitted, but we don't permit obscenity. We don't permit fighting words, but otherwise we create a marketplace of ideas. What's wrong with that?
Well, let me set the table for this a little bit by saying I understand as a constitutional lawyer that the First Amendment is binding on the government. It isn't necessarily binding on private parties. So is Twitter free to censor content it doesn't like? Certainly it is. But I would suggest also that if we want to maintain freedom of speech in our society, we have to create a culture of free speech. And I think that just as a matter of policy, it's better for Twitter to allow a broad range of ideas and subjects to be discussed. Now, in terms of where this falls out legally, I believe, I mean, we've got Section 230.
Jeff, can I stop you there for 1 second? You mentioned that Twitter essentially is not subject to the First Amendment because it's a private actor. But we know the Biden administration has been working with Twitter and Facebook to regulate content on their sites. So why aren't they a state actor? And the second question I have for all of you is, Guidry mentioned hate speech. How can you regulate hate speech? Isn't hate speech impossible to define and just another vehicle for censorship?
The federal court cases on this make it pretty clear that in order to have state action, there must be a significant nexus between state actors and the private entity that is also acting, such that it would be fair to consider it state action. Now, that may be the case with the Biden administration's attempts to influence Twitter in one way or another. But I was also going to make the point that under Section 230, Twitter gets an exemption for libel, slander, defamation. They get an exemption. Why? Because the speech of all of the people speaking on Twitter is not Twitter's speech. It's each person's individual one. And all Twitter is doing is providing a platform for people to speak. Now, why does that matter here? It matters for one reason. Because if they're going to censor content, then they are then a publisher, a producer, whatever, and they should no longer be exempt.
All right, that's a fair point. But Fernando, I want to bring this question to you. Guidry mentioned regulating hate speech. Hate speech, though, is impossible to define, and it's often used as a vehicle for censorship. So what's wrong with my solution that Twitter just follow First Amendment guidelines? All unpopular speech of diverse perspectives is permitted to create a marketplace of ideas, except obscenity and fighting words. What's wrong with that?
Because you can't really define what obscenity is, and you really can't define what fighting words is. The fact of the matter is that with all this stuff, whether we're talking about, when guys were discussing Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire popped into my head, which is a communist standing on a corner giving out flyers, and the state of New Hampshire tried to stop him during World War, I can't remember if it was World War I or World War II. And then Brandenburg v. Ohio popped into my head, the burning of the crosses on lawns. No matter what standards you have, it's almost impossible to try to narrow this stuff down, because then it becomes arbitrary and capricious. And at the end of the day, what is going to get Elon Musk to keep it in the middle is the fact that he paid $41 or $47 billion.
44.
$44 billion for Twitter. He's hemorrhaging money, and he needs advertisers. Okay. And advertisers, at the end of the day, they want things to just be vanilla, because they want everybody to buy their products. They don't care what you believe in. So that's really what's going to keep it in the middle. I do agree with Jeff's point in that once they start moderating content, now they become the press. So now, yes, your First Amendment rights are going to attach. Either again, you're going to be the newsstand where you stand there and you let it all in, or you're going to create these committees that are going to say, well, we don't want this in, but we want this. This
All right,
one is good, this one's bad.
Yeah, you're making
Can't
a
have it
great
both
point
ways.
here. So then I have one final question for this panel. Social media is essentially the new public forum. People don't go on the streets or in public parks to politically protest. They do it on Twitter and Facebook. So why shouldn't the policy be that we're going to respect the First Amendment and accept all speech, even if it's unpopular, so that we can have a marketplace of ideas where diverse perspectives are welcome and informed citizenry is provided? Guidry, why would you disagree with that?
Because I have to disagree with that, because it doesn't make any sense. And
so you're for censorship, essentially, based on views you don't like.
But again, Adam, you sound a little bit Republican, going to extremes, all or nothing.
And you sound a little bit Democrat.
The conversation is not about that, It's not. We need to really figure it out what content would be the most beneficial to this community, to this.
That is authoritarian on its face.
Adam, I'm not. You know what? There's dark web. There are a lot of driven sick people who could use and be obsessed different digital media, which those platforms are incredibly good place for them to do that, and they could manipulate and cause so much harm. And when it comes to definition of like obscenity, I think one of the Supreme Court justice said, you know it when you see it. I want to take back to the hateful speech. I don't think that any hateful speech, Adam, should be completely eliminated. But I think speech that could cause immediate harm, it's unnecessary.
With all due respect, it sounds like you want to censor speech that you don't like, because when it comes to hate speech, who knows how to define that? You're giving people the ability to subjectively define it and to suppress views which they disagree. Maybe we should censor your views. Jeff?
Well, I think it's been odd for a long time that former President Trump can't keep his now famous Twitter account, but Vladimir Putin does have a Twitter account. Now, I mean, if we're going to censor...
Can I just cut you off for 1 second? Guidry does have a really good point. There is some speech that is such garbage, that is so lacking in social value and so hurtful. Why should we allow it? I mean, Guidry is right in that respect. Why are we allowing speech that doesn't contribute to public discourse, that doesn't contribute to the marketplace of ideas, and that hurts people and really ultimately results in no public benefit whatsoever?
Well, part of the problem is who makes the decision about what speech has value and what speech does not have value. Giedra, at the beginning of this program, talked about how she wanted to form, or Twitter to form, kind of a ministry of truth within the company to determine whether speech was in bounds or out of bounds. Who do you want to put on that committee? You, me, Fernando?
Definitely not Adam.
I think that the problem in trying to say, okay, we're going to have somebody that's going to decide whether a particular idea has value is fraught with problems.
Right, but isn't Guidry right to an extent that there's got to be some speech that's off limits? Like in Snyder versus Phelps, the court held that you could hold signs saying God hates fags and thank God for 9/11 outside of the funeral of a deceased veteran. That to me is off limits. So I do agree with Guidry in part. I also agree with your sentiments too. So where's the compromise? Fernando, I'll give you the last word.
As far as I'm concerned, it should all be out there. And the reason is you need to know who these people are. If you push them into the shadows, they become far more harmful than if they're exposed, saying whatever they're saying on Twitter, on the corners, from their balconies. There has to be a nexus between the bad words and what happened and the action that has taken place. Truth is, by the time you read it on Twitter, you go talk to your buddy and you go do something, an amount of time has passed. If I remember correctly, the nexus kind of has to be instantaneous between the words and what happens. That's not going to happen. So again, it goes back to, is social media going to be the newsstand, or is it going to be the press? And if it's going to be the press and it's going to regulate what's being said, then they need to be opened up to liability. If
Well,
they're going
that's
to be
yeah.
newsstand, which is the way it should be, they let all the viewpoints out there, and then people are going to beat up on these people. We're going to know who they are, and I'd rather have that than somebody hiding behind closed doors and in basements, plotting and manipulating and forming all sorts of gangs and whatever else to then come out and wreak havoc. At
Well, I
least if
think
they're out in
yeah.
the open, you know them.
Right. And I think all three of you make really good points. And I think ultimately this is something that I guess will be left up to the people to decide. Thank you again for another great episode, and good night. Okay, so to wrap up the show, we have our hot topic. And given that Thanksgiving is nearly upon us, I'd like to ask our panelists, is Black Friday a good thing or is it a bad thing? Guidry, help us out here.
Being from a different country, being an immigrant in the United States, I never understood Black Friday. I think it doesn't make any sense. I think that the values are being distracted from what Thanksgiving stands for, thankful for your family, your friends, and that commercialism just takes away and adds some kind of plastic sense and taste to it. So no, and also there are no good deals. The best deals are actually after Black Friday, to my understanding. So I
agree with you 100%. Now, Jeff, why would anybody go shopping the day after Thanksgiving when there's ridiculous lines and a complete mob of people? What's wrong with people?
Well, I'm kind of two minds on this. I used to enjoy it, sometimes taking my kids, trying to get the deal. I would buy a new computer every other year on Black Friday and generally got a few $100 off. But it has gotten completely insane. I mean, you see people with tents pitched and lawn chairs, and sometimes people are out there 3 and 4 days before to save what, $200 or $300 on a TV or something. I mean, I don't get it. I'm not going to camp out on the cement in the freezing cold to save a few $100 on a TV. That's just lunacy.
Fernando?
Black Friday's awesome. It gets your family out of the house early after Thanksgiving. They don't linger until 11, 12, 1 in the morning. Two, as someone who is a former Best Buy employee and was part of the loss prevention team, I worked plenty of Black Fridays. Guess what? It's a double shift a lot of times. You get a bigger paycheck. And Guidry is 100% correct. Black Friday is a scam. The best sales are Saturday and Sunday. That flyer that you get on Black Friday is the flyer for the entire weekend. So all of those things that are on sale on Black Friday, they're going to be on sale Saturday and Sunday.
No way.
Here's my advice. Do what I do. Shop on Christmas Eve and just buy gift certificates for everyone. Thank you. Good night. We'll see you next time on America on Trial.